Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Om Hari Om, Om Hari Om, Om Hari Om Tat Sat. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Saturday afternoon reading and discussion of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as presented to us in How to Know God, which you can see by the title, How To. It's a workbook. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are a workbook, and the interpretation and commentary were done by Swami Prabhavananda so that we would get an insight into the depths and breadth of what Patanjali is offering in the way of instruction in this very carefully prepared workbook or guidebook to God realization, how to know God. So with that, welcome and namaste, everyone. Is there anything that was left from prior readings and discussions that remains a question in your mind that needs clarification, or anything that you'd like to offer that you meant to offer before or just occurred to you as something to offer from your own wisdom or experience?
Or just tell Cindy, if I don't know who Cindy is, then I don't know who I am.
Well, there you are. We none of us know. As Swami Sarvadevananda once said in conversation, we should think of ourselves as nobody. We are not things. We are that. So, in any event, anything else from anyone? Thank you, Glenn. All right. So, Jeff, if you would tell us where we are and where you're going to begin reading.
Oh, certainly. In the book that most of us have, we are on page 198. We are now I forget how, this is the third chapter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Third chapter, Sutra number 30.
And yeah, and the title of this chapter is Powers.
Powers.
These are the powers that you gain through being able to concentrate and meditate together on some particular object, which the technical term in Sanskrit is samyama. When you focus your concentration on a particular object and you eliminate all the other thoughts from your mind, which is the definition of meditation, then you attain this state of samyama. And it is said in the state of samyama, if you can truly, that what happens is whatever you focus your attention on reveals itself in full to you, which we've been reading about as we go through these sutras, what reveals itself if you bestow your attention and meditation on a particular object. So what is the Sutra 30, you said, Jeff?
Yes, sir. And actually, the next three sutras are grouped together. So 30,
So,
30, 31, and 32.
okay, please read them all together.
Sutra 30. By making samyama on the navel, one gains knowledge of the constitution of the body. By making samyama on the navel, one gains knowledge of the constitution of the body. Number 31. By making samyama on the hollow of the throat, one stills hunger and thirst. I'm repeating that one. By making samyama on the hollow of the throat, one stills hunger and thirst. And Sutra 32, by making samyama on the tube within the chest, one acquires absolute motionlessness. Number 32, by making samyama on the tube within the chest, one acquires absolute motionlessness. And then there's a very brief commentary that applies just to number 32.
Okay.
The motionlessness, for example, of the snake or the lizard. This enables the yogi to meditate undisturbed by the involuntary movements of his body.
Okay. Now, what, as someone pointed out when this was read previously in the last session, that what is being pointed to here, though not sequentially in the vertical order, but are three chakras of the body. The solar plexus, the chakra, the spiritual center that is associated with the solar plexus. The chakra associated with the throat, the fifth chakra. So this is the third and the fifth, the navel and the throat. And then the fourth, which the Swami, and the reason that Patanjali puts it in this order is because this is, it has to do with the comment that the Swami made. When we learn to focus our attention uninterruptedly on the heart chakra, the fourth chakra, stillness comes over the body. First, the breath becomes more slow. Thoughts become more infrequent and more spaced apart. The heart slows. Brain waves slow. All of this has been proven by research done with the machines that measure these things. Finally, you lose your sense of the body. You lose the sense of your limbs, and then of your chest area, then the abdomen, and so then all you're left with is this sense of the head. Swami Vivekananda experienced this so intensely one time that he actually called out to his brother monks, because he had come to a kind of waking awareness. He said, "Where is my body? Where is my body? Where is my body?" He could only be sensible to the fact that his head was there, even though his body was fully there. So this is how still one can become. A great sage once told Mirabai, "Become so quiet you can hear the blood running in your veins. Become so still, so quiet, you can hear the blood running in your veins." Now this is literally possible. So this is what's being mentioned here in Sutras 30, 31, and 32. The spiritual centers of the body are being gestured to by their association with those parts of the body. Anything else from anyone about any of this?
Brother, I'm sorry, what did you say was the significance of the order that he addressed the
well,
chakras in?
Well, the important part, as far as the going further into knowing God, is the absolute stillness of the body that the Swami mentions. Read that commentary again, please. The commentary on 32.
The motionlessness, for example, of the snake or the lizard. This enables the yogi to meditate undisturbed by the involuntary movements of his body.
Not only the involuntary movements, but the involuntary sensibility of the body. So that's why they're put in this order, so that this one could be mentioned last, because it is the most important. Stilling hunger and thirst may be of great use to a yogi who has no access to food and water for some time. Becoming aware of the constitution of the body may be useful to a yogi who wants to render the body invisible, for example. That's one of the things that happens when you become aware of the constitution of the body. You can make it invisible. But so this is the significance of the order. The most significant one, as far as how to know God, becoming invisible doesn't have anything to do with God, knowing God. Being without hunger or thirst may be very useful to you, but it does not have anything directly to do with knowing God. But stilling the body in the way that Patanjali and Swami Prabhupada point to, that has a great deal to do with your ability to know God. Thank you, Jeff, for that question. Anything else from anyone? All right, dears. If all that's clear, wonderful. So let's read on.
Sutra 33. By making samyama on the radiance within the back of the head, one becomes able to see the celestial beings. Repeating 33. By making samyama on the radiance within the back of the head, one becomes able to see the celestial beings. The radiance within the back of the head is not to be confused with the radiance of the seventh lotus, the highest center of spiritual consciousness, which is situated at the top of the head. And he refers us to chapter 2, Sutra 50.
So the radiance at the back of the head, this is something that one discovers in practicing concentration and meditation. You discover that there is this radiance at the top of your spine, at the back of the head. The spine runs into the back of the skull. This radiance comes up the spine, and this is a more physical and psychical phenomenon rather than the spiritual one associated with the spiritual center at the top of the head. That's a spiritual radiance and is sensed differently. This physical radiance that has to do with the energy coming up the spine, the Kundalini energy coming up the spine, generates a radiance at the back of the head. It's not particularly significant, although enjoyable. And that's why the Swami doesn't make anything more about it than he does, or Patanjali for that matter. Anything else?
Brother Shankara, is that the third eye chakra, back of the head?
No,
No,
the-
it's not the third eye.
the
Okay.
third eye is in the front of the head.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's in between the eyebrows.
Yes, exactly. No,
That's where.
that's an entire, and again, that has both a psychical and a
see.
spiritual aspect. The psychical aspect is, it has to do with the occult power or powers associated with the third eye, which is, there's no reason for us to go into that.
Okay. Thank you.
But there's also a spiritual aspect where you will see, this is where you will see very clearly your Ishtadevata. You'll see that Ishtadevata at the heart center and at this third eye or sixth center. But these are not associated with this radiance at the back of the head.
So does this correlate with what the Divine Mother told Sri Ramakrishna when she told him to keep himself in the sixth center of Tantra?
Yes. So that he would see both the relative and the absolute at once. The relative is, of course, full of divine beings and all of these things associated with the relative at its highest aspect. The relative at its highest aspect is what we think of is the Vedantic heaven, not the heaven of the Christians or Hebrews. There are some correlations, angels and divine beings and so on. But this is the highest relative plane. Above that, there is no thing. Above that, there is no thing, nothing. It's what happens at the seventh chakra is inexpressible. I mean, it isn't that I can't express it. It's simply, of course I can't, but it's that it is inexpressible because there's no thingness there. There's nothing to point to. Anything else? Thank you, as always, Glenn. Okay, let's read on.
Sutra 34. All these powers of knowledge may also come to one whose mind is spontaneously enlightened through purity. Repeating number 34. All these powers of knowledge may also come to one whose mind is spontaneously enlightened through purity. When the mind has reached when the mind has reached a very high state of purification, the psychic powers may come to it spontaneously and unbidden without the making of any samyama. And that concludes the brief commentary.
And Swami Prabhupada was very clear with his disciples that this is not only probable, it is likely to happen that one or more of these psychic powers, clairvoyance, clairaudience, the ability to heal, all these things, will come to you simply by practicing the instructions and the mantra that were given to you at initiation. These may happen simply because the mind has become purified, as is said. And so he said, Prabhupada said, whatever it is that arises for you in this way, practice it just once. Just once. Then renounce it. Why practice it just once? Because if you don't, you will be endlessly curious about what it would have been like. The mind will be constantly nagging at you about it. So Swami Prabhupada said, satisfy that desire to know what it is like, but then renounce it. Don't use it for any purpose whatsoever. And so this is the significance of what he said. So please read the sutra and the commentary again, dear.
Sutra 34. All these powers of knowledge may also come to one whose mind is spontaneously enlightened through purity. Repeating, all these powers of knowledge may also come to one whose mind is spontaneously enlightened through purity. When the mind has reached a very high state of purification, the psychic powers may come to it spontaneously and unbidden, without the making of any samyama.
And the word knowledge, I'm sure, in the Swami's comment or in Patanjali, is not a capital K. It's a lower case K, which means it's not spiritual knowledge. It is either physical or psychical knowledge.
And so, brother, I think the message there could be, don't waste your time trying to get these powers individually when you can just practice a pure life and get them all at once.
Well, but you don't want them at all.
Right.
You don't want them. They may come to you unbidden, as it is said, simply because the mind has been purified, and therefore these higher potentials simply emerge. But this is why Swami Prabhupada said, whatever emerges spontaneously because of your practice, just use it once and then renounce it, because you do not want to go down that road of having these powers. It's simply it's a detour, it's a side road. It will not take you anywhere closer to God realization, because it has nothing to do with God realization. It has to do with time, space, and causation. God realization is beyond time, space, and causation. So we don't want to be trapped in time, space, and causation for any reason. This is the understanding. Any comments, concerns, or questions about any of that? All right.
I have a question, Brother Shankara.
Yes, Janaki.
Something that just occurred to me. I'm looking behind you at the picture of Jesus on the wall laughing, which is such a great picture.
Yes,
But-
isn't it?
So Jesus performed many miracles and healed many people. He, of course, is an avatar. So this warning that we have not to go down this road sure doesn't apply to Jesus, but doesn't it relate to this though?
Well, yes, of course. But what did he say? He said, I'm not doing this. It is your faith that brings this forth. This power comes forth from me because as an avatar, I possess and contain all power, all that is. I am omnipotent. So it's all there. It's all potentially there. But as he said about the Roman centurion who asked Jesus to heal his servant, Jesus said, it's not me that's done this. It is your faith. And he said, I have not seen such faith in all Israel. Which meant among the Jewish people, he had not seen such faith. He found it in this Roman centurion. So, yes, Jesus performed these miracles, but it was always not as a deliberate thing. Even if you read the stories of the loaves and the fishes, Jesus just tells them what to do. And he doesn't do anything. He just tells them, gather together the scraps and then feed everybody and there will be enough. Not because he did it, but simply because of that omnipotence, that it's like that story of all of those pilgrims being fed. When there was one grain of rice left, Krishna ate the grain of rice, and everyone felt fully fed. Same idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janaki. Good question. Anything else from anyone? I mean, yogis may perform miracles willfully. If you become omnipotent, they happen spontaneously. Okay, if there's nothing else, please read on, Jeff.
I have a comment or
Yes,
question.
please, dear. Yes.
So, none of us were there when Jesus did the loaves and fishes thing.
Mhm.
And you can believe in it as a, an actual kind of turning upside down of natural law in order to produce this abundance of loaves and fishes from nothing or very little. Or, since we weren't there, we don't know exactly what happened. And Jesus and the people who had come to see him may have all been in sort of an altered space together, where, when you are in a blissful altered state because of being in the presence of a realized being, you don't need food.
Well said.
I mean, you're full.
Well,
And there may have been the sense that people were fed with literal fish and literal loaves of bread. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't.
well,
Maybe
this
they
is,
got something better. And
you're absolutely right, dear. And this is why I brought up that story about Krishna and eating the one grain of rice. No one was fed there. It's just by being in Krishna's presence, who was fed one grain of rice, they all felt replete.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that same idea. But you're absolutely right. And we weren't there, and we don't know what happened. And you may be perfectly right that they all felt, because of being in this altered state of awareness, because of being in the presence of omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience, they may have felt completely replete, fed.
Yeah.
Good thought. Anything else from anyone? All right, please read on, Jeff.
The next two sutras are grouped together. So 35. By making samyama on the heart, one gains knowledge of the contents of the mind. Repeating 35. By making samyama on the heart, one gains knowledge of the contents of the mind. And Sutra 36. The power of enjoyment arises from a failure to discriminate between the Atman and the Sattva guna, which are totally different. The Sattva guna is merely the agent of the Atman, which is independent, existing only for its own sake. By making samyama on the independence of the Atman, one gains knowledge of the Atman. And repeating Sutra 36, the power of enjoyment arises from a failure to discriminate between the Atman and the Sattva guna, which are totally different. The Sattva guna is merely the agent of the Atman, which is independent, existing only for its own sake. By making samyama on the independence of the Atman, one gains knowledge of the Atman. And commentary?
So hang on just one moment. Please note how long this sutra is. Please note its number, 36. It is giving us a summation of something very, very important. So read 35 and 36 again, and then the commentary, please, Jeff.
Certainly. 35, by making samyama on the heart, one gains knowledge of the contents of the mind. Sutra 36, the power of enjoyment arises from a failure to discriminate between the Atman and the Sattva guna, which are totally different. The Sattva guna is merely the agent of the Atman, which is independent, existing only for its own sake. By making samyama on the independence of the Atman, one gains knowledge of the Atman. And the commentary. In the ordinary state of consciousness, the highest enjoyment we can know is the joy inspired by the guna of sattva. This seems to us, in our ignorance, to be identical with the joy of the pure Atman, but it is not. Sattva, even in its purest state, is still a guna, and sattvic joy still contains a measure of egotism. What we have to understand is that the gunas are only agents of the Atman, and that sattvic joy is only a pale reflection of the joy of the Atman, which is without egotism and entirely independent of the gunas. By making this samyama and discriminating between Atman and sattva, the yogi passes beyond earthly enjoyment into the joy of the Atman itself. To which I add, wow, that's a lot going on there.
Well, it is indeed. So please read the commentary again and understand now that what we've gotten to is the end of a series. This was 35 and 36. And so something very, very important has been communicated both by Patanjali and in the commentary of the Swami. So please read the commentary again, Jeff.
In the ordinary state of consciousness, the highest enjoyment we can know is the joy inspired by the guna of sattva. This seems to us, in our ignorance, to be identical with the joy of the pure Atman, but it is not. Sattva, even in its purest state, is still a guna, and sattvic joy still contains a measure of egotism. What we have to understand is that the gunas are only agents of the Atman, and that sattvic joy is only a pale reflection of the joy of the Atman, which is without egotism and entirely independent of the gunas. By making this samyama and discriminating between Atman and sattva, the yogi passes beyond earthly enjoyment into the joy of the Atman itself.
Earthly enjoyment, however high and fine it is a thing. It arises and passes away. This independence of the Atman that is spoken of, both by Patanjali and by the Swami, we have no idea what is meant by independence. We know only dependence. We are dependent on limitations and conditions, on thingness, on that which arises and passes away in the mind and the senses and the intellect. So it is when, as is said, you make this concentrated effort to differentiate between the sattva guna and the Atman, that this samyama, the truth of the matter reveals itself to you. But it reveals itself in a way that is completely inexpressible because it happens in the silence of deep meditation and this concentration on discerning the difference between the Sattva Guna, and the Atman. Any comment or question at all about any of that?
So in this where it says that it seems to us in our ignorance to be identical with the joy of the pure Atman, is it saying that Savikalpa Samadhi is that it's we're mistaking the joy of Samadhi for the pure joy of the Atman?
Yes, Savikalpa Samadhi is still within time, space, and causation. It is still, there is a thingness about it. This is why Christ said, we see now as through a glass darkly. We can see that which is beyond, but we can't be with it. We can't be consumed by it as a moth would be consumed by a flame. So this is, but this doesn't mean that there's anything to be dismissive about Savikalpa Samadhi. Completely the opposite. It is devoutly to be wished because it is so transformative. It lets you know, even though you're just witnessing it, not being it, you know that the divine presence is all there is. Now, its independence of time, space, and causation remains a mystery. And so it's when we get to this seedless samadhi that is attained through this the success of samyama. But again, as Patanjali points out, at this point, this is no longer a matter of self-effort. You start off making self-effort, and then somehow you get swept along. You've gotten into the current of the river, and suddenly the river begins to pull you along. And where you end up and what you are at that point cannot be said, because there is no experiencer there. It's independent of all time, space, and causation, which is by definition, time, space, and causation are an experience. Thank you, Glenn. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara, I have a small doubt here. Sattva is a guna, yes, and it says it got a little bit of egoism. It still contains, but sattvic joy doesn't have egotism. Sattvic joy comes from sattva guna, isn't it? How can that be possible?
As long as we're enjoying it, dear, there is by definition a little egotism involved. As long as there is an enjoyer, there is an ego. It doesn't mean there's anything bad or wrong going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bad or wrong to have an ego.
Okay.
It may be a very pure ego,
Mm-hmm.
a mature, a ripe ego, as Sri Ramakrishna says. But as long as there is an experiencer, by definition, there is an ego.
Okay.
So sattvic joy has, the highest sattvic joy has this tiny component of egoism in it. Otherwise, there would be no experiencer.
Thing is that the ego can become so subtle that the state is so close that, that to go beyond it, we just couldn't, that we can come that close, but we just can't go into complete egolessness. And still,
You've just given another description of Savikalpa Samadhi. That close.
Thank you.
And while I was a question that Jaime brought up, that particular sentence is probably loaded in many ways, and I would probably go back. I would probably go back to Sutra number 2, and here's what it is. It says, he says it's still a guna. So when you say
Mhm.
something is still a guna, it is part of Prakriti. If something is part of Prakriti, that means it will be a vritti, which needs to be understood by a chitta. And one of the part of chitta is ahamkara, which is egotism. So I think Swami is saying very pointedly that it's still a guna. So it's still a guna. That means we need to go back to Sutra number 2. It tells us chitta, vritti, nirodha. You have to stop all the vrittis that are coming through chitta. And sattva guna is part of Prakriti. It is coming through the chitta. And you need to not get into ahamkara, which is part of the chitta. So,
Sure.
I don't know,
Thank
brother.
you, Bhaskar.
Thank you
Thank
Thank
you
you.
thank you for tracking back as you
for
often
clarification.
do. This gives a perfect clarification. That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Thank you
As
so
long as
much.
it creates a mental modification, however subtle, however joyous, however, nevertheless, it is a vritti in the chitta. It is a mental modification. And so we are still within time, space, and causation, or as you say, prakriti, which is the birthplace and instrumentality of the gunas.
Thank you, Brother Shankara and Bhaskar
Thank you, Bhaskar, so much.
and Glenn.
So there we are. We've come to the glorious end of this series of sutras. And now we're going to start off with 37, which adds to 1. So this will be a new series of 9 sutras that are all somehow in a very deep and profound way related and will be summed up when we get to to Sutra 45. So anything else from anyone before we read on? All right, dears, please let's read on.
The next 3 sutras are grouped together, and then that is followed by a lengthy commentary that goes on for about 3 pages. So,
Okay.
Stop me if you want to discuss something, or stop me if I mispronounce something. There will be mispronunciations, I think, in this one. Sutra 37. Hence one gains the knowledge due to spontaneous enlightenment and obtains supernatural powers of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Repeating 37. Hence one gains the knowledge due to spontaneous enlightenment and obtains supernatural powers of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Number 38. They are powers in the worldly state, but they are obstacles to samadhi. Repeating 38. They are powers in the worldly state, but they are obstacles to samadhi. And Sutra 39. When the bonds of the mind caused by karma have been loosened, the yogi can enter into the body of another by knowledge of the operation of its nerve currents. Repeating Sutra 39. When the bonds of the mind caused by karma have been loosened, the yogi can enter into the body of another by knowledge of the operation of its nerve currents. The yogi, says Vivekananda, can enter a dead body and make it get up and move, even while he himself is working in another body. Or he can enter a living body and hold that man's mind and organs in check, and for the time being act through the body of that man. That's the end of the quotation. This recalls a story that is told about Shankara. When Shankara was still a boy in his teens, there was a philosopher named Mandan Mishra who held that the life of the householder was far superior to that of the monk. an opinion which was widely shared throughout India. Shankara determined to hold a debate with Mishra, knowing that if he could convert him, he could also convert Mishra's many disciples. After considerable difficulties, he succeeded in making Mishra agree to this. It was understood that Shankara, if he lost, should have become a householder, and that Mishra, if he lost, should become a monk. At Shankara's suggestion, Mishra's wife Bharati, herself a famous scholar, acted as umpire. After a debate of several days, Mishra was ready to admit total defeat. But Bharati said to Shankara, "Wait, husband and wife are one person. You have only defeated half of us. Now you must debate with me. You may know all about philosophy, but I choose another subject. I choose sex. It is a great science. Before you can claim either of us as your disciples, you will have to debate with me and defeat me on that." For the moment, Shankara was baffled. As a monk and a mere boy, he knew nothing whatever about sex. However, a plan occurred to him. He asked for a month's delay, and this Bharati granted. At this time, it so happened that a king named Amaraka lay dying. Shankara told his disciples to hide his own body in a safe place and take great care of it. Then, by yoga power, he left his body and entered the newly dead body of the king. Amaraka apparently revived and continued to rule the kingdom under the guidance of Shankara. Now he refers to Shankara-Amaraka. Shankara-Amaraka proved to be a brilliant and just ruler, winning the admiration of all. But Amaraka's two wives soon realized that something extraordinary had happened. For the new Amaraka not only showed astonishingly youthful energy, he seemed as ignorant of sexual love as a baby. Meanwhile, the preoccupations of kingship and domestic life began to cloud Shankara's mind. He began to forget what he had done, why he had done it, and who he was. He began to believe that he was really Amaraka and not Shankara. Shankara's disciples learned of this. Since monks were not admitted to the court, they disguised themselves as wandering musicians and so came into his presence. They began to sing the poem called Moha Mudgaram, the shattering of delusion, which Shankara himself had composed. Beloved, strange are the world's ways and vast thy ignorance. Who is thy wife and who is thy son? Whose art thou? From what place come hence? Ponder this in thy heart and bow to God in reverence. The words recalled Shankara to awareness of his own identity. The body of King Amaraka fell dead to the ground as Shankara left it and returned to his own body. Later, when Shankara appeared at Mishra's house, Bharati knew at once what it was that he had done, for she also possessed yoga powers, and she admitted defeat without further debate. That concludes the commentary.
Now, this is one of the more famous stories of Adi Shankara and his debates with other great philosophers of his time. And the understanding was always the same. If I win, I, Shankara, win, you become my disciple. If you win, I will become your disciple. Adi Shankara never lost. So he created disciples after disciples after disciples. And of course, when the leader of a group of spiritual aspirants, when their guru became Shankara's disciple, they also did. So this 16-year-old boy had literally thousands of followers. The close ones were the ones that he charged with taking care of his body, and the ones that came to the court of Amaraka and reminded him of who he was and why he had done what he had done. And of course, then he returns to Bharati and the debate, and she, as it says, also possessing yoga power, recognized immediately that he now knew what would be necessary to defeat her in debate. So she just said, I admit defeat. So this is a powerful story and illustrates this ability of a yogi to enter the body of another and take possession of it. Now, this is one of the most attractive. This is why it comes at the beginning of this series of apparently, this has been remarked on by many swamis in conversation, even in talks, that this is one of the most attractive powers that comes to a yogi. The ability to, Don Juan Matus talks about it. He says, you must beware to Castaneda. He says, you must be very aware of this and very careful not to let anyone, and here's how to know what's happening if someone tries it and so on. So these things, this is a great temptation for the accomplished yogi, the one who is capable of making samyama. So it's not likely that any of us will be tempted by it, but who knows? We do not know. So we've received our instruction here. Anything at all from anyone else about any of this?
I have a question.
Yes, dear.
The debate was supposed to be about sex. And then when Shankara enters the king's body, he is a brilliant and just ruler, and but he shows no knowledge and total ignorance about sexual love. So is the reason that he won the argument or won the debate because even though he was living the life of the king and had all these temptations, he was above it all and didn't know what to do with those temptations?
No, as it was said, he began to lose his way. He began to lose focus, and one of the things that was causing him to lose focus was the loving attentions, sexual attentions of his two wives. He learned about sexual love from them. This is what is gestured to without saying it specifically, but I'll be bold enough to say it. This is one of the things, his kingly duties. One of the kingly duties was to father children with these wives. And so he learned about sexual love. And so Bharati knew that when he returned. So she knew that he knew exactly what was necessary now that he had returned to his fully Adi Shankara self. He would know what was necessary to defeat her in debate. So she simply said, I concede. Does that get it, Jeff?
I'm missing something. I guess I don't really understand what the debate about sex would have been when she says at the outset, I choose sex, it is a great science. You will have to defeat me on that.
If you want to know the science of sex as it is understood. Everything in India, all aspects of human life have been in one way or another formalized into workbooks. One of them is the Kama Sutras. Kama means pleasure. Fulfillment of desire is satisfying your kamas. Sexual, and it goes into great detail about the aspects of sexual love and how to practice it. So this is what Bharati knew. Whether she knew that book is irrelevant. She knew what it contained, the science of sex. So just as the cosmology of the universe has been explained to us in great detail through Kapila's Samkhya philosophy, so the science of sex has been explained in great detail in the Kama Sutras. So does that answer the question?
Yes, because by conducting this feat of yogic power, he went to sex school. and,
Yes, exactly.
and
But
therefore could win the argument.
that's why he went. He didn't go to be a just king. But of course, Adi Shankaracharya couldn't be anything else but the adulation and the love, the physical and other kinds of love that were expressed to him. As he said, his mind became clouded. And what a lesson for each of us. Careful what you wish for.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
when you mentioned his mind becoming clouded, my favorite sentence or passage in this is, the preoccupations of kingship and domestic life began to cloud Shankara's mind. He began to forget what he had done, why he had done it, and who he was. He began to actually believe that he was Amakara and not Shankara. This just seems like the exact predicament that we are all in.
Precisely, dear.
And it doesn't say a lot for a householder's role in life. I mean, there's so many distractions.
Well, dear, this is the thing. Sri Ramakrishna said, the householder who is also a spiritual aspirant, who is seeking after God, seeking after knowledge of Brahman or the Atman, they are the true hero, because they have all of these preoccupations that are you just mentioned, and that seem to minimize the role of the householder. All right, a householder without spiritual aspirations and a determined spiritual practice, it isn't that they're unworthy. There's nothing unworthy about anything that the divine has created. But it is less. But the Sri Ramakrishna says, the householder who is a determined spiritual aspirant is fighting without a shield, because they're fighting the battle of worldly life and being reasonably prosperous, taking care of their family, whatever is necessary, with the sword in their left hand. And then they're fighting the battle of spiritual attainment, spiritual realization, with a sword in the right hand. So they have no shield. They are left completely buffeted by everything that the world has to offer. And this is what the vows of a monastic are. They are a shield. You no longer have to fight the fight of the world with your left hand. You can hold the shield of your vows in front of you and say, I'm now finished with that fight. I'll fight only the fight of, and so this is why Sri Ramakrishna says, what else is a monastic to do but fight that fight with their right hand and hold up their shield of their vows? But you're quite right. You know, the householder that is not seeking spiritual attainment or realization is, well, they're just living the life of the world, and who knows what will become of them. That's none of our business. But we know what will happen to someone who is determinedly fighting the battle of spiritual realization. As Sri Ramakrishna says, practice just a little and someone will come forward to help you. So Sri Ramakrishna says the householder is the real hero. Jesus gestures to some of the same things.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone?
You know, in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, I mean, he warns us so many times about lust and gold and
Yes.
the Maya that comes from it.
Oh, yes.
What I don't was her Adira, the Sufi woman saint, and she talked about one time where, you know, people would offer her tons of gold to marry her and stuff, and like she threw the gold down and like it was, you know, called it a pile of poo that drawed flies.
Right. Right.
It's Rabia. Rabia, right, Brother Shankara? Rabia is the one somebody offered her gold, or
Yes.
and then she refused to.
She's one of the ones, yes.
Yes, she's one of the Sufi.
This has happened to more than one. The
Yes.
same thing happened to Mirabai. She
Yes.
was offered a kingdom.
Mhm.
All she had to do was remain married to this prince. She would have had all that comes with the prince when he inherited the kingdom. She threw it all aside.
But if you look at at the Vedic times, if you look at all these Upanishads, most of these realized people are Grihasthas. If you take Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, if you take Chandogya Upanishad, these are all Grihasthas that they did all this,
Yes.
all
But that was a very different time, dear.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it is.
Very different time. It wasn't the end of the Kali Yuga.
But even if you look at this Bharati, in this, he gets married with Bharati, and during the wedding, in those days, they have to discuss all these Upanishadic, prescriptions and everything. And he found a lot of mistakes what they were talking about. But he is the bridegroom. He cannot get up and say anything. That's why right after the marriage, he started writing all those things for 20 years. One day, Bharati comes into his room with a lamp in the evening. At that time, he asks, "Who are you?" And then he tells all this story. And that's why on that book, he dedicated to Bharati. And he became the Sishya of Shankara.
There you are.
Well, I think this story, it may not be directly what the intention is, but the fact that Shankara, the author of the Crest Jewel of Discrimination himself, whose mind became so clouded that he was without intervention, he would have forgotten who he was, that, without the help of a guru and, like that we really don't have a chance if people of that stature get lost.
I can only say amen to that, Glenn.
And I've often wondered that in the scriptures or shastras, it is said that you start with the brahmacharya, then you go to the grihastha, which is the family life, then you go to vanaprastha, which is asceticism, and then finally you go to sannyasa. So if somebody didn't jump into sannyasa right away, but actually went through all the other three stages, probably that sannyasa would be a much more stable one, and not somebody in sannyasa having to backtrack, just like Sankaracharya did here, understand some of the experiences, and then again come back to sannyasa.
Oh, very well said. I'll leave you to talk that over with Shankara, whether he leapt over the other two. But you're right. He did indeed, quite deliberately. If you read about his conversations with his mother, she wanted him very much to become a householder. And he said, no, mother, I want to become a monk. And so he did indeed leap over the Grihastha stage and the Vanaprastha stage. Very well said.
Brother Shankara, to follow up on Glenn's comment, perhaps this is a story of how it's important to be in spiritual community, so that when you get lost, you have people who can do that intervention for you.
Amen, brother. I can testify to that in recent experience. So thanks for bringing that up. Yes, this is why Sangha, congregation, is so very important to us. It helps keep us tracked. It helps keep us doing the necessary. Anything else from anyone?
And that shows how Maya is so powerful
Oh, amen,
for
brother.
anybody.
Amen, Balakrishna. Maya it is not called Mahamaya for nothing. And what Sri Krishna tells us in chapters 5 and 6 of the Gita about the power of his gunas and the power of Maya, if we try to pretend it isn't so, we're simply just fooling ourselves. So there we are. Anything else from anyone? Well, I think this was a very productive class myself. From here, it seems very productive. What a great discussion of these sutras from so many people coming forward and making contributions. And all of you, as is always said, even though those of you who don't say a word, we feel your presence. We know you're there. I'm not saying we know what you're saying in your mind. That's not the point. We feel your presence and the fact that you are participating. So, any final thought from anyone before we sign off?
Actually, that Moha Mudgaram is a very famous book also. That's where all these things, who is the son, who is the father.
Yes, well, that's exactly what Christ said as well. You know, it's one of the reasons that my late wife said she found Christ to be too much of a hard ass. That's what she said. You know, that he was that he denied his mother and said, "Who is a mother? Who is a son?" and so on. It's something that the avatars always say. You know, I am independent of all of that. Though Adi Shankaracharya kept his promise to his mother. At the end of her life, he went to her and cared for her as she was departing the body. That was the condition under which she would allow him to become a monk. So, if there are no final thoughts from anyone, anything at all from anyone? All right, dears. Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amrutangamaya. Abir Moiti. O dearly beloved Lord, Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from this realm of endless noise and relentless delusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Peace, 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 and thy blessed benevolence unto us all. Beloved Lord, make it so. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we know we are always in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Hari Om Tat Sat. So until tomorrow morning, we'll have an open forum on Jnana Yoga. It'll be in the chapel, and it'll also be broadcast on Zoom. So join us either way. And I'm very delighted to say that my son, who is a disciple of Swami Prabhavananda, and whose name given to him by Prabhavananda is Bimal, given to him at age 10, he became Swami Prabhavananda's disciple at age 9, will be our facilitator for that. He knows his Jnana Yoga very well.
Oh, that's so wonderful, Brother Shankara.
Yes, it is a joy.
It's very, very delightful.
It
Yes,
is.
thank you.
You'll find him a very engaging and skillful facilitator. It's one of his great gifts. So until tomorrow morning, Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai.